What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Highlight of Business podcast for business people. And today I'm joined by my good friend that I've known way too long at this point because I'm getting old, Kacy Maxwell, the CMO for the Provisions Group and an entrepreneur and an author. This guy has a family. He's got more time in a day than I do, and I'm going to ask him about all that stuff. Kacy, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Chandler. It's good to be here. I'm
Yeah,
excited.
man. Yeah, I'm excited for you to be able to share some of your stories here. We've been connected a long time on LinkedIn, even worked together at Ramsey for a little while. So I know a lot about you, but I'd love for you to unpack a little bit of your background. And it's a fascinating story how you got into marketing.
So I've been in marketing for a little over 16 years, but it's kind of not where I started when I graduated. Did not go to school for marketing. The idea of being in a office job for 9 hours a day was torture just to my college brain. And so I went out to LA and decided I was going to be an actor and went out there, which basically translated to waiting tables and doing little side projects, college videos and that kind of stuff, like for college projects and stuff like that. I did a couple commercials, but I got to the point where I'm like, I don't like it out here. I went to school in Nashville. I'm like, I'm going to come home and I'm like, what can I do that has some sort of creative aspect to it? And so the big show at the time was Mad Men. And I was like, the advertising looks really, really cool and creative. I'm going to do that. So I started heading down that path. But literally, I didn't take one marketing or advertising class in college. I didn't really know what it was. I thought it was just sitting around drinking bourbon and making ads, right? And so I started applying to marketing agencies and had no idea. And I won't give a long story here, but I kind of fibbed my way into my first role. I talked to the HR person, and they're like, "We've got an account management role open." So I was like, "Oh, okay, that's great." And I even asked her, I was like, "Is that in the accounting department?" She's like, "No." And for somehow, I don't know, she decided to have me come in for an interview. So I called the head of account management and I pretended that I was, so this is my acting chops came in. I pretended I was a graduating student. I was about to graduate. And so I said, if you were going to hire someone for an entry level role in account management, what would you want to hear on the interview? And so he talked for about, 10 minutes. And I literally wrote down everything he said, didn't understand half the words. I just memorized it. And so I went into that interview and I just, acted my way into that job. And so it's not great that I don't take a ton of pride in that outside of when I got in, I did everything I could to learn. Cause that's my thing. I love learning. And kind of ever since I've been on the B2C side, I've been on the B2B side, I've been on the agency side, I've been on the client side, e-commerce side. I've kind of been all over the place in my career that led me to CMO at Provisions Group today.
I was going to say it was a risk worth taking given where you've actually ended up now as the CMO at Provisions Group. And I'd love to know, like, so now that you're there in that role, what's it like doing B2B advertising for an IT staffing, IT consulting company? That is a very unique target market you're looking for. You're not selling, children's books to everybody in the world, right? This is a very niche audience you're looking for. What's been the most unique challenge in the last year that you've been there?
Yeah, I would say it's not one that I expected. So Provisions Group it's an interesting company because it started as a staffing company. So it was an IT staffing. About 10 years in, they started kind of diversifying what they offered and started offering consulting.
Mm.
And now consulting is a significant part of the business. It's over 60% of the business. And that is an area that we are growing in every year. The interesting thing is that because we do consulting for IT, very high level consulting for IT, everything falls under that: infrastructure, cloud, CRM, compliance, healthcare IT. Everything under the sun rolls up into that. And so the biggest challenge that I have is how do you get the overall message out there of, hey, we're an IT consultant, And a lot of times, I mean, there is search volume. People are looking for IT consultants, but a lot of times they're looking for a specific solution underneath that. Right. And so what I'm looking to do is I'm building out a marketing strategy that both builds that high level brand awareness as well as the depth into each of those. Because what so many people do, and this is one of the, and again, I'm not going to get into a huge pitch right now for provisions, but because IT is so diversified, right? People go and look for specialty IT consultants to get a specific need. So they're like, I have a Salesforce problem. I'm going to go get a Salesforce company. And that's great. And they're experts and they know it. Great. The problem is they can't do the other things, right? They can't do cloud. So they got to go get an IT agency to do cloud. And then they get another one to do this and another one to do that. And what happens is they're spending 90% of their time managing SOWs and managing all of these different companies to do their IT. And the thing that I love about Provisions is that we can do all of that. And so one of the unique value propositions that we are taking to market is, how much time are you wasting on vendor management? Like, it's a significant amount of time, and we're able to kind of bring that all under one roof and consolidate that. So it's a unique challenge because, again, you have to train people that aren't looking for that high level. They're looking for this. You've got to then elevate them and kind of open up a new way of thinking about solving this problem.
Yeah, in the restaurant business, we called that having a loss leader. It's like I didn't make much money on my pulled pork sandwich, and it was my number one seller, but it was like I got them in for that. And then all of a sudden they realized, oh, you guys have milkshakes, or oh, you guys have catering options, or oh, and so on and so forth, right? So it totally makes sense. It's so funny. Every time I do one of these interviews, it's like, man, I'm going to learn something revolutionary about business today. And it's so often is just like football is football. Blocking and tackling is blocking and tackling. It is what it is. Acting is acting, right? But it's some people are, Brad Pitt, and some people are Ryan Reynolds, and some people are, Julia Roberts. And it's just like, there's things that are the same and translate, but it's not all the way the same. So it totally makes sense to me. But overall, so that's sort of the high level vision of like where you're taking them from a strategy standpoint. But what's next? Like, how do you guys actually execute that from a plan tactic standpoint?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is Provisions has been around for 20 plus years. I guess this is the 20th year, but we're going to be celebrating 20 years next year. And the company has been a sales driven organization. So they did not have a formal marketing department until about 2 years ago. And so one of the reasons that they brought me in was to turn marketing into a growth engine for the company. And so what I'm doing is I'm basically, it's kind of like, if you think of honestly like a startup, you're kind of starting like green field. There's not a lot there. I don't have to come in and tear down a lot of things, right? I'm kind of building everything from scratch, and that's great. It's also really hard because you don't have just a ton of content. You don't have a bunch of stuff to go in and say, what hasn't worked? What has worked? So we are going in and we have developed the model of like, we want to get stuff out quick and see what's working. And if it is, let's lean in, let's try to push it further. And what's not working, then we just did. So I've failed probably more at this job already than I did most of my other jobs because I'm throwing stuff out and I'm like, nope, that didn't work. So that's kind of the front end. The second is we're consolidating our tech sprawl. So many times people do the same thing with their marketing technology that they do with their technology vendors, is they go out and get a specialty product to solve a specialty problem. And that's great until you're trying to look at that data and make it all work together. You have to spend so much time pulling everything from these disparate sources. And because I'm starting this from scratch, we're not big enough to need all of the additional features that a lot of this marketing technology adds. So we are looking at actually consolidating a lot of these platforms into a single platform so that we can be faster, we can scale a lot quicker. So those are kind of the two areas that I'm really leaning in this first year to kind of start getting this crank going, because it's like once you got it going, you're like, how do we make it go faster? I'm like trying to like take rust off and like, hey, let's see if we can get one revolution of this thing, and then we can start turning it a little faster as we go.
Yeah, you got to love being in a 20-plus-year-old startup. That's a
Yeah.
very unique challenge. How's the ownership group and other executives of the company taken to that? They're like, hey, we're all established over here and we have very proven systems in the way we do things. But then Kacy and the marketing team are sort of running and gunning and they're trying to build stuff. Is that just being communicated on a leadership level every week, or how does that work?
The leadership team is great. They're the ones that had the foresight to say, we actually want to scale, and the way that we're doing business today, it's not going to scale the way that we want to. So they made the decision to bring me in. And a lot of times people won't bring in a CMO level. They'll often bring in kind of like a middle manager to do things. And the problem is they expect high level as well as low level delivery, right? And when I say low level, like the tactical
Mm-hmm.
delivery,
Yeah.
as well as being able to think of like where are we going?
Strategy. Yeah.
And so yeah, and so they've brought me in and they are in full support. However, something that has been established for 20 years can't change overnight, right? Where they got their business today, where Provisions got today, and they've been growing year over year, and we're having a good year in a year where there are so many layoffs everywhere. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I every day I see somebody else just got laid off on LinkedIn because they're cutting back. Like, we are holding strong. We're not growing hand over
Mm-hmm.
fist, but we're still growing, and that's exciting. But it's 20 years of doing things a specific way. And so I'm coming in and I'm, in a lot of ways, we're like going to pass out the who moved my cheese. And the answer is Kacy.
Mm-hmm.
It's because that's what it is. I'm just moving everybody's cheese. And, sometimes that goes well and sometimes that doesn't go well. And so I'm learning as a leader, how do I communicate better with
Mm-hmm.
people and not be the guy that comes in? I mean, nobody likes to invite that kid over to your house and, you spent all this time building this beautiful tower of blocks, and he just comes in and goes, that's ugly, and knocks it down. Right. So I don't want to be that kid, but some of the stuff is ugly and we've got to
Mm-hmm.
knock it down and literally start from scratch on some of that. And it's a daily thing. But again, the leadership is 100% on board. It's a great group.
Yeah.
They're just solid people and humans. And so, yeah, it gets tense sometimes when we work through it and lean in, but it's just I feel very blessed to be a part of
Mm.
that group.
I mean, so many times in business, success truly just comes down to how functional the leadership team is, from a health standpoint, from a culture standpoint. How well can they work together? How well can they handle conflict together? And so when you have a whole department that's sort of being stood up from the ground up from zero and inside of a legacy organization, that makes a lot of sense to me that it's actually working because the leadership team itself is actually healthy. And a lot of times clients we meet with here at Highbeam, it tends to be the person you described at the very beginning, where it's like a marketing manager, marketing director, whatever fancy title you want to put on that. But really what that means is you have to be responsible for all the strategy every week and month and quarter and year. And then also at the same time, you have to be responsible for delivering all of that stuff. And it's just not acceptable for most companies. I would say, like, just ballpark, Ben, my partner here, always makes fun of me. He's like, you love hyperbole, but it's true. I mean, it's like, it's good for positioning. It's like, hey, if you're a $1 million, $2 million and up company, like, you should start to have some organizational structure. You're no longer a startup. You've got real revenue coming in. I think it's 5% of companies in America that get past $1 million in revenue. And so when you
Hmm.
get to that point, you kind of have to evolve and grow. But I don't think a company stays around for 20 plus years like Provisions and doesn't actually have some sort of level of healthy leadership. So that makes a ton of sense to me. But I did want to ask you about, they chose to bring you on full time after you started as a consultant there, and that has different names. Sometimes what's popular now is sort of the fractional CMO model. And so, as a person that's been a fractional CMO and now a full time CMO, what when should an organization utilize a fractional CMO? When should they just go straight to having a full-time CMO? Or does it make sense to do what Provisions did, which is sort of like have a fractional model and then transition into a full-time model?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually still a fractional CMO. So one of the interesting things when they brought me on, I started walking them through a program, And basically, it takes it all the way back to say, hey, we've got to align on what the business strategy is, and then we'll work on our positioning, value props. We'll talk about go-to-market strategy. And so I started walking them through this process, and that is one of the reasons that they hired me. One, to take Provisions through that long term, but also to be able to offer that to a lot of our clients. So we're an IT staffing company, but so many technology decisions are now driven on the marketing side. And a lot of the people that we work with come in with technology problems, and it's actually not fully a technology problem, right? It's a marketing strategy problem that goes back to a business strategy problem. And so I sit on a team, an advisory team, that any of our clients that work with us, they have the ability to access me and other VCMOs that I have on my team to be able to do that. And so your question was, when do you choose to do a CMO versus fractional? It's a really good question. And the worst answer to give, which is one of the answers I'm going to give, is it depends on the different type of company. But I can tell you one of the hardest things is I've worked with clients that have never had marketing in their organization. And to take that first step to say, I'm going to bring somebody in, usually one of two things happens, right? You either say, I'm going to bring somebody in that is at the level they need to be able to do that sort of high level strategy, and let them know that they're still going to be the only marketing person on the team, and they're going to have to implement some key things until they can get some wins, et cetera. So kind of like bringing on the CMO, but the CMO that joins that has to have that in mind and go like, I'm willing to do that for X amount of years. That I see that a lot in startups as well. They bring in that, and that person is often either the founder or one of the co-founders, or they go and they say, let's bring on a marketing manager, exactly what we were talking about. And the problem with doing that, outside of what we described earlier, is that they don't even know how to interview that person. They're like, can you do marketing? And they're like, yeah, I'm going to say words like SEO and ROI and ROAS. And
Nobody's
then they're
ever
like,
just memorized a script before an interview, have they, Kacy?
Nobody.
That's never happened.
Nobody's just good at interviewing and can sell you on something. But that's what happens. And so they come in and they're like, yeah, I can do strategy. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. And so they get somebody in, and then what that person ends up doing is just what leadership asks them to do. Because they don't even have the positional authority to be able to lean in and guide and say, no, I know you want to do that. This is actually what we need to do. So one of the things is, if you've been around for a while and you've never had a marketing team, if you want to bring somebody in just to post something to Twitter, great. Hire an intern, just have them post to Twitter if that's what you think marketing is. Like that's great. But if you say, I want to figure out how marketing should fit in my organization and what it should do and what it could do, that's when you bring in a fractional CMO to kind of set the stage, put the overall strategy together, and then you can bring somebody in that mid-level and they're implementing, right? Because they already have the big stuff. And so I'm doing that with a couple clients where they kind of brought me in up front. I'm able to kind of sit and do that high level. I'm actually helping them hire the right team members. So my team is interviewing some of these people. And then once they get on the team, I'm helping mentor and sitting at that leadership table to help push them in that direction. And so it depends on because there are times, and I'll say this, and then we can move on. But there are some founders and owners, CEOs, whatever, that are really good at marketing, and they understand marketing strategy. And so if you have somebody like that can just naturally push in the right direction and naturally says, this is what our strategy can be, you're probably fine bringing in an implementer. Like it, but
they're wearing that CMO hat, that they're
yes,
founder
they
and
are
CMO at that time.
They are and they better not sit there and expect that that
Mm-hmm.
manager to play
Yeah.
that manager is going to be an order taker
Yeah.
that is going to go out and implement this stuff.
But we've met so many people though that are that marketing manager that they might know one specific channel of marketing. Let's say they're really good at email or really good at social media or whatever. And then the expectation is that they can do all the things or they know all the things. And that's where it ends up getting into real trouble. And then that person gets fired or whatever. And then we come alongside and we end up meeting the owner again. And they're like, I don't really think I need marketing. Word of mouth works well for us. Referrals work well. Marketing doesn't really work for our business, yada, yada. And then you go do a little deep dive and you're like, oh, you guys have had a terrible process to this point, because there's no way we live in a world where everybody that's big markets and you're the one exception that you don't have to. Like, it just doesn't.
Right.
I think you can get to a certain level, but if you ever want to go beyond that, it's just, if you don't figure out the marketing piece, it's never going to work out. But everybody always figures out the sales piece because it's so directly tied to revenue that they're like, hey, I got to sell something, otherwise I'm not in business anymore. And so when you're talking to either a new ownership group that you're working with or maybe other, execs on the team, like, how do you differentiate sales activities versus marketing activities? Because we look at them like two sides of the same coin, but definitely different sides. But people tend to make them the same thing a lot of times, and I think that's where they get in trouble. Do you feel that way, or how do you look at it?
So I definitely don't think that they're the same things. But one thing that I am actively fighting against, and when I say fighting against, it's like a hill that I am willing to die on, is that sales and marketing are not separate.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, at any given point in the customer journey, sales and marketing are happening in tandem. There's this sort of mindset where um, marketing does a bunch of stuff, creates this perfectly packaged lead like a stork, and drops it off, and then sales raises it, right, and then it becomes a great contributing member to society. And
Mm-hmm.
that's silly. It's a silly ideal, but that's when we think of just, oh, I generate leads, right? Then that's kind of what you're saying, right? You're dropping off these leads at their doorstep. And so when we have a customer journey, so we've worked on a customer journey for our company, and in each of these areas, whether it's awareness or subscription or ascension, we have what groups are involved in this, right? It's sometimes it's marketing and sales, sometimes it's marketing, sales, and our advisory, sometimes it's delivery. But in all of these, there is an intermingling that happens, right? So maybe sales meets somebody at a conference. That then goes into the CRM, and marketing starts dripping and doing some relational touches and sending. Well, based on their activity, then sales reaches out again and say, hey, I saw you downloaded this thing, right? It's not, there's not a handoff. And the reason that I fight for talking about it that way is that when you look at them two separately and you set goals that are independent of each other, there's at times like a fight for who did that. And it's like, well, no, we did this or we did that. And it's like, no, we as a company did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You look at those individual KPIs to say something's not working here. Let's tune it, not to say like, let's give credit here,
Mm-hmm. Like, this is
right?
the most
Because
important KPI. Yeah.
yeah, very rarely
Mm-hmm.
does a email, a
Mm-hmm.
singular email,
Mm-hmm.
create a purchase, right? Same with like one conversation. It is a series of events that happen. And so I don't think they are the same function. They are definitely not. But marketing will not be successful if sales is not fully aligned with them and they are working together. They can't,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
marketing can't close a lead.
Mm-hmm.
Marketing can warm people up, but at the end of the day, it's the salesperson. If you're in that type of organization, right? I guess if you're selling an e-commerce or you're purchasing something, yes, marketing can close that. But if you have a sales team that works on contracts and goes to close it, you can't do it without sales.
Yeah.
And so making sure that they are aligned and working together is how you're going to scale.
It'd be like somebody saying the quarterback is the reason you won the Super Bowl. It just doesn't, that's not how it works. They're very important. It's a big
Mm-hmm.
piece of the reason why you won the Super Bowl, but it's not the only reason. I mean, without the ball boy, without the defensive coordinator, without the defense. I mean, you need the fans. It's all encompassing, and that's how we win, in this game and how we stay in it, really, right? That's good. Well, I can sit here and talk about that all day, but I definitely want to get into this Sketchwell thing you've got going on. So, like,
Yeah.
I don't want to steal your thunder. Please take a second to, like, what is it? Why'd you start it? How'd you start it? Because I'm obsessed with it. I'm a big visual learner guy because, I get too lazy to read sometimes. But the way you craft images has been awesome on LinkedIn.
Thanks. That I appreciate you saying that. So, how did I start it? Where did I start it? I one of the things that I absolutely love is taking complex ideas and making them simple.
Mm-hmm.
The way that I do that the most naturally is through images. There's something about me that I don't feel like I can communicate my point without some sort of image. And that's why on podcasts I probably use my hands, because I'm trying to create some magical visual with my hands. I don't know.
It's like the
But
Disney thing from back in the day when they would like,
yes,
yeah,
you're writing it. Yeah, right in the name. But I mean, like any meeting I'm in, I got to go up to the whiteboard and I got to draw something, because I gotta make sure that you see what I see in my brain. And sometimes words can communicate that, and a lot of times it doesn't, because everybody interprets words based on their frame of reference, right? And so I may say a word that I get one picture in my head, and you hear a word and it gives you a different picture, and we think we're aligned. We're like, we got it. We both said these words, but we're thinking about it differently. And so one of the things that Sketchwell does is it makes, I've been working with authors, speakers, companies that have relatively complex ideas that they want to convey. But the only way they can do that is if they sit with you for 40 minutes. They sit with you for an hour, right? Or if you read their 3,000 word LinkedIn post. Nobody has time to do that, right? Most people, even on long posts, they're kind of skimming, hitting the highlights, etc. And so they're coming to me and saying, can you help me create a visual that is going to communicate my framework, my value proposition, something where people can pick it up very, very quickly, or that will be so compelling that they'll stop and give it a second. And so how I started it was completely by accident. So about 3 years ago, I had just kind of started leaning into LinkedIn. Somebody had told me, hey, it's a little different and people are actually interacting and it's fun. So I'm like, okay. And I'm not looking for a job, but okay, I'll go on. So I started doing what all the gurus said. It's like, follow a bunch of people and then post every day. Just whatever you're thinking, just get it out there, man. Get it out there. And so I started just posting stuff, and not a lot of traction. I didn't have an audience. And I was like, this is okay. But I did find that I was meeting people that I enjoyed talking to. And the people that would interact with my post, it was like good comments and it would start a conversation. It wasn't like just kind of the stuff that you get on some of these other social channels. And so one day I went to a conference. I was sitting in there, and I do what I just do naturally when I take notes is I draw. I draw pictures because it helps me better understand the content that is getting said to me, whether it's a video or a book or any of that. So I just drew that. And I just started using an iPad, and I'd got the workbook and a digital format. So I was drawing the things, and I was like, somebody saw me doing it and was like, hey, you should share that. I was like, it's drawing. Like that's kind of like kid stuff. It's drawing, their sketches, their doodles. Like that's not professional. And I want to look professional on LinkedIn. So no, they're like, no, that's actually pretty cool. I like that. Helps me understand that a little better. I was like, okay. So I went and posted it and got more interaction on that than any of my other posts that I'd ever done. And I was like, okay. So then I posted another one and then another one. And then I just kept going and kept going. And I've been honing that over the last 2.5, 3 years. And it came to the point again, like, and I'm just like writing this stuff, drawing this stuff, putting it out there, never asking, I'm not like, hey, I'll do it for you. But I steadily started getting people reaching out to me and saying, can you create that for me?
Mm-hmm.
can you do that for my business? And I was like, what? Like, you know, I'm not an artist. I'm not, you know, because that's a whole different story. Because again, if you think back to the original story, I wanted to do something creative because I always considered myself creative. But getting in the account management side of marketing, that will beat the creativity right out of you. And so I had kind of learned over my last 15 years that I was not creative, and that we hired people to be
Mm-hmm.
creative. And so more people, when they were asking me to do this stuff, I was like, I'm not, I, well, okay. And so it just kind of, I fell into it. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to actually formalize this. I'm going to turn it into a full side hustle. Yeah, it's 100% a side hustle. I do it nights and weekends, and it's fun. I just enjoy it. And so like, I've pushed myself to, because I talk a lot about visuals, but it's also the words. So if you look at any of my visuals, I am very, very selective about the words that make it in there, because it's
Mm-hmm.
not just pictures. It is important words that is going to make those pictures make even more sense. So it's a little bit of that mix. And so when people come and they want to work with me, I'm like, listen, if you want somebody to do this really, really cheaply, you can go to Fiverr and, or you know,
Mm-hmm.
find somebody right out of school who is going to 100% be a better artist than I am. But if you want someone to use the brain that I've developed over the last 16 years in marketing and
Mm-hmm.
honing messaging within a visual down, I'm like, I can do that.
Underground.
You're
Yeah.
gonna, you came to the right place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. And it's, what's crazy is it's, it's a simple thing. Like, it's not complicated. It's not, you've taken something really complex and boiled it all the way down to its like most, um, bare bones thing in a weird way. Then it's like something about that simplicity. It's like the movie Inception, you know, when they talk about you got to get it down to the smallest little idea at the deepest level of the subconscious, and then all of a sudden it grows into that own person's mind and they hear it, and you know it's their own thing now. And it's very much that way, where because it's so simple, because it's so easy to consume, it definitely wasn't easy for you to make and boil down to that level, where it's like the essence of that person's thought. You know, I've seen some of the work you've posted for some other people where it's like their thought leadership, especially around the art that is leading people in organizations. And you read that stuff and you're like, you know what, that is true. And even though I'm running a marketing agency and I'm leading people here doing that, it's like it's the story may not have come from that exact analogy. Maybe it was a restaurant analogy. And then because it got boiled down, though, the essence of it was so clean and simple that I was able to actually take it and deploy it. So I love it. Everybody should go to Kacy's LinkedIn, Kacy Maxwell on LinkedIn, follow him there, and then click on the visit my website and sign up for his newsletter, because the Sketchwell newsletter is awesome because you get a little thought out, little creative thing. And then you're even like putting other artists on too, which I love, which is really cool.
Yeah, over the last 3 years, I've met so many people that are just really good, not only with visual artists, but kind of doing the same thing I do, taking
Mm,
complex things and making it simple.
yeah.
But it's funny that you're talking about making it look simple. Like, I think a lot of people look at the stuff that I'm doing and they're like, I could do that. And I'm like, maybe you can. But I've had so many people reach out to me and go, hey, I went and bought an iPad and I downloaded the application that you said that you used. And it's hard. It's actually really hard to do that stuff. And I was like, that's the biggest compliment that you could say to me, because that means I've got it down to that simplest level. And everybody that I've worked with on the Sketchwell side has said, I could go hire a designer to do this. And what's going to come back is going to be probably very visually appealing. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem is it's going to feel corporate,
Mm,
and I'm not a corporate person. Like,
mm,
I don't want to do that. And there's something about the sketch that just makes it more simple, because you know, you think of when you're brainstorming with someone, how many ideas were written on a cocktail
I was about to say,
napkin,
yep,
right?
yep.
Just sketched out. Or you're sitting in a meeting and someone sketches out something and they show it to
Mm,
you and they're like, that's it. Because again, what you said, you've boiled something down to the heart of the idea. And
mm,
when it's boiled down and it's super compelling, you know you got a really good idea.
Yeah. No,
If you
I love
have
that.
to use a lot of words and put all of this fluff around it, it's probably not a good idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
something like some of these leadership books where they got one idea that they get
300
into the first
pages.
chapter, and then they add 200 more pages just to sell it as a book. So
Oh man, that's a whole nother can of worms. I could talk about the books I've read and wasted money on and have
yep,
been real upset about it. I used to get
yep.
way more mad about it. And then I realized like, oh, this is just a game and it's whatever. And then there's a few books that are just like so amazing that you cherish them dearly. So I always end these interviews like this, and it's always interesting me. Like sometimes people agree with each other, sometimes people go in totally different directions, but it's so based on the experience and current perspective of the person in your seat. So, what is the most overrated thing in marketing today? The thing that you're tired of hearing about that you're not actually seeing drive results? And then on the flip side of that, what is the most underrated thing in marketing that you're like, why is nobody talking about this still?
So I would say probably the most overrated thing is anything somebody says is the silver bullet for your business, or anybody who says this is the absolute thing you have to be doing in your business.
Mm.
I love LinkedIn. I'm there all the time. And again, I want people to be confident. I'm confident in the
Uh-huh.
stuff that I talk about. I was just very confident about Sketchwell.
Mm-hmm.
Sketchwell is not perfect for every organization. It's not going to be a silver bullet for bad information, or, it's not going to fit for everybody. But so many people just talk about their strategies, whether it's a strategy in paid or it's a strategy in AI or whether it's a strategy in webinar. And they say, this is the way that it must be done. All of that crap is overrated to me, because what often happens, and this is just me, I read that and I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm failing. Right. And we're creating this imposter syndrome, this failure,
Mm-hmm.
by saying that this is the only thing that works. And I found that sometimes I've done that stuff and sometimes it's worked. And sometimes I've done that stuff and sometimes it hasn't worked. Right. And so saying this is what I experienced or this is what is working for me is actually something that I'm really leaning into. Like if you look at any of my LinkedIn posts, I talk a lot about leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And a lot of times, if you get into that middle, it's Kacy confession time, right? Because
Yeah.
it's let me tell you why I think this, what went wrong, what I've been doing wrong, etc. And this is why this works for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the thing that, like, anything can possibly work for anybody. That's again why we're trying a bunch of stuff, because it may work and it may not work.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I am very much excited about, and again, I think if you're on LinkedIn, this is actually something that people talk a lot about, and that is leaning in on the human aspect of the brand. We've spent a lot of time in our organization leaning in on LinkedIn. And so I've got a group that I'm helping mentor and drive those conversations and just getting out there so that we can share Provisions Group unique point of view out in the marketplace. And we've already seen that we've got a decent size page following on our page. We won the best places to work for the second year in a row. We were super excited about it. So we posted about it from the company page. I posted about it from my personal account. Our CEO posted about it. Our chief strategy officer posted about it, and a lot of other people on our team posted about it. What do you think is, out of all of those, is one of the lowest visibility posts?
I wouldn't know.
The company page.
Mm. Yeah.
Putting that on the company page got the least visibility, least interaction, etc. Posting it on all of these other, the CEO more than doubled what the company page has, and
Mm-hmm.
he's got 1/3 of the followers that page does. People like people. People want to work with people, and people want to buy from people. And
Mm.
so the faster we can get our awesome people, like the reason Provisions Group has grown is because when they come and work with us, they stay with us for the long term. Our
Mm.
retention rate is crazy just because they like working with people, and people stay working at Provisions. So they're working with the same person for 15 years,
Mm.
right? And so the faster we can get those people out and people go, oh, I want to work with them. I like them. It just adds that versus, so our logo is wheat. And so if you want to know why it's wheat, you should go to provisionsgroup.com. It's a really cool story of why it's a piece of wheat. But what I say is, I was like, nobody wants to hear from the faceless wheat, right? And that's our logo. Like it's a wheat, and nobody
It's time to
wants. They want
separate
to.
the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah, yeah. Like they want to hear from the people that work at the wheat company
Mm.
that's not a bread company, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so like that is something that as you figure out how to get that system working, you're just going to have people naturally coming. We're already seeing some wins, people coming just from an inbound perspective because of the posts that we're putting out there. So
Yeah, I
I'm
love
all
that.
in on the personal brand for the company.
I love that, and that's the exact road we're taking at Highbeam. It's me and the co-founders here. We talk about it. We have a behind the scenes vlog where it's just like literally we rented a new office and we put it on YouTube, and it was us coming into an empty space, and it's documenting your own story and what's happening in your company, and sort of it's very authentic. Not to be cheesy with the word, but there's not a lot of fluff there. It's like we are who we are, and we're going to be part of your team or we're not, and that's that. Well, Kacy, dude, I really appreciate this, man. I have enjoyed the heck out of this interview, and we'll make sure to link up Sketchwell and Provisions Group because I want to find out why the wheat logo exists. And so now I got to go into the show notes and figure it out. We appreciate you joining us. We appreciate everybody that was listening today, and we will see you next week.